You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Since 1877, Australia and England have been battling it out against each other in Test cricket. Over that time, many players have had the honour of captaining their country in an Ashes series or in an Ashes Test. There have been 42 captains to captain Australia in Ashes cricket and 55 captains to captain England in Ashes cricket. For the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast historical series, we are looking back at all the players who've captained Australia and England in Ashes cricket. In this historical series episode, we are looking back at the Ashes captains who captained Australia in the 1900's. Hugh Trumble was a fine off-spinner who was deadly on a wet wicket, but who could take wickets in all conditions. On the wet pitches often found in those days, especially the sticky wickets in his native Australia, he was virtually unplayable. A tall man, he bowled off-spin at close to medium pace, with considerable variation in flight and pace. He turned the ball enough to beat the bat on true pitches, but on a wet wicket could make the ball bite, turn, and lift spitefully. He fooled many a good batsman with a well-disguised slower ball, often resulting in a caught and bowled. In a Test career that spanned from 1890 to 1904, he played 32 Test matches. He took 141 wickets at 21.78, with best innings figures of 8 for 65, best match figures of 12 for 89, 9 5-wicket hauls, and 3 10-wicket hauls. One of his greatest performances came, unfortunately, in a losing cause, making 64 and 7 and taking 4 for 108 and 8 for 65 in the Oval Test in 1902, England winning that game by solitary wicket. He was the first man to take 2 Test hat-tricks, both at his home ground at Melbourne, a feat equalled only by Wasim Akram of Pakistan and Thomas Matthews of Australia. He became Australia's 11th Test captain and took over the captaincy during the 3rd and 5th Tests of the 1901-02 Ashes series when Captain Joe Darling was unable to play. The 2 Tests that Trumble was captain led to victories. Australia won the 3rd Test at the Adelaide Oval by 4 wickets, and Australia won the 5th Test at the MCG by 32 runs. Australia went on to win the 1901-02 Ashes series 4-1 in the best of 5. His Ashes record was the same as his Test record. He took 141 wickets at 21.78, with best innings figures of 8 for 65, best match figures of 12 for 89, 9 5-wicket hauls and 3 10-wicket hauls in 31 Ashes Tests between 1890 to 1904. Monty Noble was regarded as the greatest all-round cricketer produced by Australia. He excelled as a batsman, bowler, fieldsman and captain, notably in placing his field to block a batsman's favourite strokes. In a Test career that spanned from 1898 to 1909, he played 42 Test matches. As a batsman, he scored 1,997 runs at 30.25, with 1 century and a highest score of 133. As a bowler, he took 121 wickets at 25, with best innings figures of 7 for 17, best match figures of 13 for 77, 9 5-wicket hauls, and 2 10-wicket hauls. His most notable bowling performance for Australia against England was at Melbourne in January of 1902. In the first innings of the very strong team captained by A.C. McLaren, he dismissed 7 men for only 17 runs, and 6 in the second innings at 10 runs apiece. 13 wickets in the match at the very small cost of 77 runs. He became the 12th Australian Test captain. His Ashes captaincy reign spanned from 1903 to 1909 and led Australia in 3 Ashes series. In that time, he led Australia to 2 Ashes series victories in 1907-08 and 1909, and a lost series in 1903-04. In 15 Tests, he won 8, lost 5 and drawn 2. His Ashes record saw him taking 115 wickets at 24.86, with best innings figures of 7 for 17, best match figures of 13 for 77, 9 5-wicket hauls, and 2 10-wicket hauls as a bowler, As a batsman, he scored 1,905 runs at 30.72, with 1 century, highest score of 133 in 39 Ashes tests between 1898 to 1909. Clem Hill was a batsman who played for Australia during the 1800s to the 1900s. He was ranked among the finest cricketers in the world during a long period. In a test career that spanned from 1896 to 1912, he played 49 test matches, scoring 3,412 runs at 39.21, with 7 centuries and a highest score of 191. Especially brilliant batsman on hard pitches, Clem Hill scored 6,274 runs, average of 52.28 in Sheffield Shield matches, a record until beaten by Don Bradman. His highest innings was 365 not out for South Australia against New South Wales at Adelaide in December of 1900, his average that season being 103.33. In similar matches, he made 206 not out at Sydney in 1895 and 205 at Adelaide in 1909. While able to drive hard to the off or straight, usually with the ball kept down, Clem Hill scored chiefly on the leg side by skillful strokes perfectly timed in place. How he turned straight balls clear of fieldsmen being exceptional. Brilliant square and late cutting made Hill delightful to watch, and in defence his style claimed admiration, while his patience was unlimited. 2 Australian Test match partnership records stand to his name. 165 for the 7th wicket with Hugh Trumble at Melbourne in January of 1897, and 243 for the 8th wicket with R.J. Hartigan at Adelaide in January of 1908. On that second occasion, an attack of influenza prevented Hill from fielding, but he batted 5 hours and 20 minutes for 160, and Australia, after being 78 behind on the first innings, won by 245 runs. He became the 13th Australian Test captain. His Ashes captaincy reign spanned from 1911 to 1912 and led Australia in 1 Ashes series. In that time, he led Australia to an Ashes series defeat in 1911-12. In 5 tests, he won 1, lost 4 and drawn none. His Ashes record saw him score 2,660 runs at 35.46 with 4 centuries. Highest score of 188 in 41 Ashes tests between 1896 to 1912. Syd Gregory was a batsman who played Test cricket for Australia in the 1800s to the 1900s. In a Test career that spanned from 1890 to 1912, he played 58 Test matches, scoring 2,282 runs at 24.53 with 4 centuries, with a highest score of 201. He was a wristy right-hander with exquisite footwork, which compensated for his lack of inches. He was 5'5". And a New South Wales boy who marked Sydney's inaugural test when England were the visitors in 1894-95 with a memorable 201, although the match is best remembered for England winning despite being forced to follow on. His uncle, Dave Gregory, was Australia's first ever Test captain in 1877. He became the 14th Australian Test captain. His Ashes captaincy reign spanned from 1912 to 1912 and led Australia in 1 Ashes series. In that time, he led Australia to an Ashes series defeat in 1912. In 3 tests, he won none, lost 1 and drawn 2. His Ashes record saw him score 2,193 runs at 25.80. With 4 centuries, highest score of 201 in 52 Ashes tests between 1890 to 1912. In our next historical series episode, we are looking back at the Ashes captains who captained Australia in the 1920s.